Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland, and I'm speaking to you from an undisclosed location. I'm continuing my series about Irish history, now looking at some not very closely connected facts which are little known. So, in 1921, a treaty was signed between Irish representatives and that of the UK government. Now, these people were Sinn Féin MPs, the Irish representatives. So it was said to be a treaty between Ireland and Great Britain. It's questionable to what extent these Sinn Féiners represented Ireland, given that the election held to the Home Rule Parliament of Ireland in May 1921 had Sinn Féiner returned unopposed for every single constituency in the 26 counties. There was only one candidate for every seat, so not a single ballot was cast. It must be the most bizarre election of all times, because the IRA's intimidation was so total that nobody else risked his neck by standing for election against Sinn Féin, because they'd killed so many people they suspected of being for the Crown or even of being moderate nationalists. Anyway, so the treaty said that this Irish Free State would be set up in the 26 counties. Northern Ireland would remain in the United Kingdom if the Parliament of Northern Ireland wished to do so. The Parliament of Northern Ireland had already started meeting in June 1921. The treaty was signed in December 1921, the 6th, and that the Crown forces could retain bases in the south of Ireland, all this. So Michael Collins, he agreed to that. Someone who was head of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, or they sometimes call it, he was head counsel of the Supreme Council of Fenians, not being an opprobrious term, Fenian back there, for members of the IRB, Irish Republican Brotherhood. It's a revolutionary ultranationalist organisation. It's very confusing looking at Irish history around that time because of the alphabet soup of different overlapping organisations. Then it was debated in Dáil Éireann, that's the Irish Parliament, but this was the Parliament for the 26 counties in Dublin. Cathal Brugha was an obdurate Republican, and Cathal Brugha saying, well, we can't possibly agree to this because if we did, that would be Ireland saying that we're voluntarily connected to Great Britain, that we were not part of the UK as such, but connected, that we're a member of the British Empire by our own free will and all the rest of it. We're agreeing to the British Army, the Royal Navy being in the south of Ireland, being in any part of Ireland we could consider unacceptable. But yeah, Brugha was right on this one. Call the blighter by his proper name, Charles Burgess. Wasn't he born in England? He was certainly half Yorkshireese. So yes, we did agree to the British Army being in Ireland, including the south of Ireland. We did agree to have a political connection to Great Britain. Well, and that we did agree to partition. We did agree that King George V was the King of Ireland. He was granted that title, the King of Ireland. Those who entered Dáil Éireann after that, right up until 1938, were swearing an oath of allegiance to George V, and Eamon de Valera was later to do so, all the rest of it. We did that voluntarily. So shows how British we considered ourselves to be, how fond we were of maintaining this connection, things that people prefer to forget these days. So we were a dominion of the British Empire. The treaty specifically said we had the same status as Canada. And there were two major parties in Ireland, well still are really, that were founded around this time. Fine Gael, who've been pro-treaty, Fianna Fáil, which is against the treaty, later came to accept it. And those are the parties that formed the duopoly of Irish politics. And Fine Gael was calling itself the Dominion Party. So why did we leave the Commonwealth, calling itself the Commonwealth Party, really? So in 1949, John A. Murphy was Taoiseach. He needed a minor party to join his coalition, Clan na Fabhlachta, as in Clan of the Republic, led by Sean MacBride. Sean MacBride is a very colourful and curious character born in France to Maud Gonne and Major John MacBride. His father had fought in South Africa, fought on the side of the Boer republics, the Transvaal and the Orange Free State, because anyone to be against the English, of course there's so many Irish troops in the British Army. So he's fighting against his own compatriots, fighting for some states which were more racist than the British Empire, fighting for states which denied the right to vote to Catholics. So it just shows how vicious and bigoted this anti-English prejudice is. They're willing to take the cause of people who are outright anti-Catholics, so long as they were also anti-English. Anyway, Sean McBride's father was executed for his part in the Easter Rising. McBride had been living in Paris at this point, and they returned to Ireland. And he spoke fluent English, but he never lost his very strong French accent. Chief of Staff of the IRA in the late 30s. And then he finally accepted ERA, this virtually independent state. And he was a barrister, still defended IRA prisoners who are going to be executed. Didn't always manage to get them off the hook. But he founded his own party, Clan Verblachter. He only died in the 1980s. One can watch some fascinating interviews with him on Robert Key's series, Ireland: A History, which came out in about 1982, shortly before Sean McBride died. So to get Sean McBride's party into office, that's why John A. Murphy announced, seemingly in a fit of pique, that the major part of Ireland would be leaving the Commonwealth. He was in Canada for some Commonwealth conference. There's another story goes that he was due to meet an aide to the Governor-General of Canada, and this chap was from Northern Ireland, was an Orangeman, and Murphy felt slighted by him, and it was just because of this that he pulled our part of Ireland out of the Commonwealth. I think that's a canard. But as for Orangemen, they get a very bad press, so they shouldn't always be denounced. They're a charitable organisation. Dr. Bernardo, who founded that children's charity, he was an Orangeman, which is often overlooked in many Prime Ministers of Canada. So I've met Orangemen, and I've told them that I'm from a Catholic background, and none of them mistreated me, which is not to say that all Orangemen are good. A few of them are monstrous, and a few loyalist terrorists have been allowed into this organisation. But I've seen dozens of Orange marches, and I've only seen one untoward incident. And the media will always focus on a handful of louts and ignore all the good conduct. It's the same when it comes to the security forces, to focus on those very rare cases of misconduct and overlook all the honourable conduct. It's the same with the Catholic Church, the overemphasis on scandals and ignoring all the good and virtuous work that the Church does. Anyway, so in Ireland, people are nationalists and Republicans. They often talk about wicked things done by English people in Ireland, and indeed there were such wicked things. But the English of centuries ago who came to Ireland, who are they now? They're Irish, that's us. They're our ancestors. Cromwell soldiers who stayed, they intermarried with people. They didn't all necessarily remain Protestant, some of them became Catholics. Apparently people on the Blasket Islands with very English surnames, well that's why they have such English surnames. And that's a staggering thing. Extreme nationalists in Ireland who have some English Welsh stock, say Thomas Davis. His father was a surgeon in the British Army, for goodness sake, a Welshman. So why not embrace that union that he embodied and say Ireland and Great Britain can be connected? Don't need to be forced to choose between them. Or Patrick Pearse, half English. Is it to prove that he's just as Irish as anybody else? He became even more anti-English than anybody else. So I'm Irish through and through, as much as anyone is, which means I very likely have some ancestry from other countries, including Great Britain, but not very much of it. Mostly Gaelic, I would imagine. So I claim that my attitude is a bit more sensible, recognising that we are connected to our neighbour and then can be politically connected to them as well, not just by blood and culture. I know one could extend this argument, well, why not be connected to the whole European Union, be a member state of it, though I am a Eurosceptic, and there is some merit to that line of reasoning, but obviously it's just more distant. If the European Union was smaller, if it was just the original 6, or even the original 12, that might hold water, but it overexpanded and the EU became almost anti-democratic, disregarded referenda which didn't go its way, like when we voted against, which was it, Nice and Lisbon, the European Constitution, things like that. And when France and the Netherlands voted against the EU Constitution, that's the kind of thing I really dislike. The huge waste of money, this Drang nach Osten, this crazy overexpansion, tearing up the Schengen Agreement, bringing in hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants and all the rest of it. So, other reflections. Yeah, my grandmother came from the west coast of Ireland, Clare, I shan't say which village. But, the famine was within living memory when she was growing up, but she never expressed the least bitterness about that. And I don't feel any rancor about it either. Certainly people suffered horrifically, and they were real people. Because it's 170 years ago, it might somehow seem unreal, but it's not. I realise it were flesh and blood people, and that could have been me, starving to death. It's the sort of horror that's hard to comprehend. And my grandmother was there when some Englishmen in the RIC, they burnt down some villages after, not villages, some houses after an IRA attack. They didn't kill anybody, the police. But again, she didn't feel that she needed to be acerbic about that. Would it have been a reasonable security force response? I don't think so, not unless they knew the people in those houses had assisted the IRA. But the police is reasoning, well, you must have known about it and you didn't warn us. So by the standards of the 20s, that was quite mild. Many armies would have killed civilians simply for being around, which obviously would have been atrocious. What else? So then we left the UK, but almost all our trade was with Great Britain. But we had no influence because we had nobody in Parliament. So these arguments against Brexit, the UK shouldn't leave the EU because of blah, 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 all those arguments apply a fortiori to Ireland's situation in 1921. Cutting off our own nose to spite our face. A century later, we still haven't brought back the language as the lingua franca. If it was that important to us, we could easily have done it. I've seen it in former Soviet states like Azerbaijan, where they brought back their own language as the primary language. So that's that. That's most of my reflections on Irish history at the moment.